the budget review group, which will probably have to be in confidential session right at the end. It shouldn't take long, but if that's acceptable, we can then just proceed through the agenda, but leave that till last. Is that okay? Thanks very much. So let's start. I hope I'm looking therefore at the right agenda, since I was looking at the wrong place for the meeting. Finance and performance work plan. Did you have any questions, Chris? No? I mean, I'm assuming we include in that the deferment of items, well, I think it's still 7 and 8, which is capital strategy and treasury management. I assume we defer that till later, yes?
I think I'm right in saying that they're going to Cabinet in February, aren't they, Nigel?
Yes.
Yes, there will be, yes.
But our meeting will be in time or not? Will
You
we
don't have
see it before?
You don't have another one of this until the 28th of March.
Oh, okay.
So you can, by all means, have an extraordinary meeting.
I will ask Nigel, is it so extraordinary that we need a special meeting?
No, there's nothing to see there, James, I don't think, actually.
Okay. And I'm looking at Anna, is that true? Okay, you corroborate your partners in crime. Okay. May we, Chris, agree to delegate to the Section 151 officer and his mighty team to discuss that among themselves before it goes to Cabinet? Okay, thanks a lot. So those two items drop away. Notes of the previous meeting. I must have looked at them. Do you have any comments on the notes? They're not minutes, they're just notes. I think they were fine.
Yeah, all good.
There's Amir. Hello, Amir. I thought you couldn't join us because you're at work.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I start work in about an hour, so that's...
Oh, okay.
I have to leave in about 40 minutes from now, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm going back to the town hall, so I thought this was in the town hall. So what we've done in the meantime, we are putting the budget review group at the end because it'll be in confidential session. We've agreed to rely on Nigel and Anna's incredible discretion to sort out capital strategy and treasury management strategy because they have to be approved to go on to Cabinet before we meet again. And Chris went along with me, and I'm sure you would agree on that. So if that is okay, I believe, I'm just sorry, I'm looking. So we had notes of the previous meeting, which I assume are fine by you, Amir, yeah? Yep. And
Yes.
Therefore, let's turn now to Emma and Jason so that we can go straight on to the report on the car parking and the like. Can I take it, just to make it slightly quicker, and there's Jane. Hello, Jane. Can I take it that we've all read this report? Yep, great. So we don't need a long introduction or anything like that. Maybe I will let, since Emma must have spent a lot of time writing this, maybe you could say something, and could you just, I mean, I know what I believe is going to be the main question, so you could maybe address it right now, which is when you're talking about resistance, just a minor point, I didn't understand, and I don't think Chris understood how you came up with your sensitivities. And in particular, and I'm now looking at Amir, who I know did economics as well as medicine, he combines many skills. A 10% increase and a 10% resistance, I would have thought washed out because it's kind of unit elasticity, you know. One goes up 10%, the other goes down, but you add them together, multiply them together, and you get zero. Could you explain, when you now introduce it briefly, how you don't get them cancelling one another?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I can run through. So I know. So Jason's joined us today as well because obviously we ODS do all of the management of the car parks for us. So we take a lot of advice from ODS from their experience dealing with these car parks. So I'm sure between us we can answer your query. I've tried to just really give an overview with this report as to how each sector or each type of car park is performing, so that we can look at them individually, and I'm happy to take questions on all of them. So with the pandemic, we have found that really it's the park and rides that are taking longer to recover. So we're seeing on weekends the usage is more aligned with how it was 1920, but on weekday usage it's still considerably down.
Yeah.
We are finding that the city centre car parks, the usage is, again, it's starting to look better. It is starting to return to how it was pre-pandemic, but the same usage levels aren't still there. But I think some of it has come from people just not working as much in the city centre.
Yeah.
So it's probably someone who would normally come in and spend £20 because they were working 5 days a week in the office. They would spend £20 at the park and ride, and then now maybe coming into the office for a couple of hours and parking in the city centre instead.
Yeah.
So we're seeing quite a lot of change of behaviour around car parks. Which is really making the forecasting for Jason's team very challenging, particularly around the park and ride figures. We've had, there's a lot of fluctuation with how customers are using this. We're getting the same feedback as well from the bus companies and from county when we're working with them. So I think, Jason, I will come to you in a second just to run through that resistance factor. But yeah, the park and rides are a particularly challenging area. And then in the suburban and urban car parks, so where we're looking around, car parks around the park sites and things, we found that the usage on those has remained relatively stable because people have still wanted to use outdoor space and things all the way through the pandemic. So we are on those ones, we are recommending that we keep the tariffs the same, but we're looking to introduce charging at more car parks to improve the income. Jason, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that at all. Or...
Yeah. I would just add a few points. I think that you've explained that really well, Emma. So thank you for doing the hard work there. But so what I would just add is that I think what the patterns of usage have changed, and I think what we have to consider is whether parking is now deemed to be an essential or non-essential consumer good. And I think before the pandemic, really, parking was essential. People actually came in every day, so we were pretty clear that our commuters would be coming in Monday to Friday and the park and rides would be full. Since the pandemic, that has completely turned on upside down, and as an employer, we're seeing employees demand home working. It's become the norm, I think, for most employers to offer an element of home working. And I think whilst we might see usage start to recover, whether it will actually ever get back to what it was before the pandemic, it's hard to say. Furthermore, what I would add is that since we've been operating the park and ride sites in 2011, I believe we took them back from the county council, we haven't had an increase. So it makes it very difficult for us to actually determine what that resistance factor would be. But I think if you couple together what Emma and I have just outlined, I think there's a high level of volatility in the market that makes it very difficult to forecast the resistance factor. And I think an increase at the park and rides at this particular juncture could actually prove to be quite decisive, and you could actually see income actually go down. I think that's why we've taken a prudent view of actually coming to a point of saying, well, it's about 10%, and we've based that on previous resistance at suburban sites when we've looked at it. Now, to be completely honest, there is no exact science, because you have to actually look at each individual car park to actually see, how people could move to different transport methods. You don't have that quite in the park and ride network, with probably the exception of Pear Tree and Oxford Parkway that are in close proximity. If you actually increase parking charges at suburban locations, there are other opportunities for people to actually get to those urban centres without driving, where the park and rides are slightly different. But I think the issue that we've got is public behaviour has changed, and it's very difficult for us to actually forecast what that would actually look like if a charge went in. I'd also add that both city and county have worked hard to try and align their policy with the park and ride site. So if we were actually, or the city were looking to actually make an amendment to those charges, we would need to consult with the county council and also Oxford Bus Company that have recently launched a promotion ticket based on the actual rates that we're actually charging at the current time. And it's not to say that we can never increase park and ride charges, but I do think the recovery at those particular sites is fragile at the moment.
Okay. Thanks very much for a good, lengthy explanation. Amir, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Emma and Jason. Can I just check a couple of points, just to make sure I've understood the paper correctly? The first thing was the point of comparison is 1920 pre-pandemic versus the financial year that we're in, 22-23. Can I just check, was there any change in the parking rates in that time period? Or are we comparing equivalent parking fees across those periods?
There was no increase at the park and ride sites, but there would have been incremental increases across the other car park network.
Yeah,
Okay,
we did introduce an uplift in the city centre car parks last year.
Okay, so I maybe need to go reread the paper and see whether we've got the detail, but that would give us an important comparison to see actually has the what's the change been in one versus the other, because one, the price has changed, the other one hasn't. As Jason said, it might not be an exact science, but it would give us an interesting comparison. The second question was just a point of clarification on bullet point 10, I think it is. Essentially, if we were to looking at this resistance factor, I just wasn't clear. So 1% increase, this is the increase with no resistance, 37,840 and 87,096% loss if there was 10% resistance. Is that a net loss? And the same for bullet points 2 and 3, so at 2% and 3%. So is that a net loss of 87,000 with a 1% increase?
So that would be the loss in income per year if we were to implement.
But net of the rise in the fee. So one is there's a gain in the fee, and then it's saying, but there's a loss, and I'm just trying to understand: is the net loss 87,000, or is it that we get 37,000 pounds in, we lose 87,000, therefore the net loss is 50,000, or is it 87,000 the net?
Yeah, so it's saying that if we were to increase it by 1%, and we saw no resistance, so no customers decided to stop coming to the park and ride as a result of that, then we would get an increase of 37,000. But if we applied a 10% resistance, the ODS are recommending that we apply, that 1% increase would result in a loss of 87,000 because of the number of customers that would choose to no longer use the site.
So it's a net loss in total. Okay, thank you.
Chris, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a few questions, but I'll stick on the one that we're on for now, and then maybe we can move on afterwards. But just, I guess, obviously Emma is aware of this because I've been in correspondence with her already, but I guess I appreciate all that you kind of said around the difficulties around projecting the resistance rate of any increase. I think I find it quite difficult to understand the basis of that 10% figure for a number of reasons. One, because it seems to me that 1% increase would represent essentially an increase from I think from £2 to £2.10 on the lowest park and ride fee, and I find it hard to believe that 1 in 10 people would turn away from using a park and ride because it's gone up by 10p. I guess what I don't quite grasp around the 10% figure is why the assumption is that there'd be a 10% resistance for a 10p increase or a 1% increase, and still a 10% resistance rate at a higher increase, you'd surely, I would have thought, expected that resistance rate to increase as the increases, if that makes sense. And I find it kind of difficult to get my head around why that is. Yeah, I don't know, Jason or Emma, if you have responses to that.
Yeah, I can answer that, and it might help answer the earlier question as well, that when we looked at a 10%, colleagues actually went through previous year's resistance at other locations, suburban sites, and that ranged from anything from 4 to 18%, depending on the location. So what they did was select 10%, effective a prudent measure to actually determine. Because we haven't had those increases at the park and ride sites historically, we haven't got that measure to go by. So I accept what you're saying, that if there was a significant increase from, say, £2 to £4, you would expect the resistance factor to actually increase. But when we were actually looking at this, we weren't modeling it on such a significant increase. And if you look at somewhere, historically, say the city centre, as you get to the higher tariff bands, there's even less resistance, because one would argue that if you're prepared to pay £25 to park your car for the day, £25.50 isn't going to actually break the bank. So yeah, you do have to look at this carefully, but we lack the data, frankly, for the park and ride sites to be able to make an informed decision.
Thank you. Do you have on this, because we'll go back and go through the paper afterwards, any other follow-up on this, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know whether the use of the kind of suburban and urban car parks is necessarily the right starting point necessarily, because surely we'd assume very different behavior from people who are using, say, I don't know, whatever kind of non-city centre car park is, than the behavior you expect from people at the park and ride. Presumably there's, very different reasons as to why people are using those car parks, and therefore presumably the behavior changes differently based on changes. But that may well be something you factored in. But I guess just if the data point is an entirely different type of car park, that appears like a very odd modelling process to me.
Yeah, I think that why colleagues have actually used that is because that is the only data set that they've actually got to look at. So they've only got suburban and city centre locations, because I think if we actually tested this year and put this up by 10%, when we go to do this next year, we will have the data that will inform the resistance factor. But because we haven't actually done this historically, we've had to take an educated guess on what we think that would be. And I think colleagues have opted for 10% as a prudent measure, because with the expectation that it would hopefully be better than 10%, but it would be better to be conservative on our financial forecasts.
Thank you. Could I just come back on this point, and I think then we should move on. First of all, I suppose in an inflationary time, people wouldn't be that surprised, but I just wonder, are there significant costs in reconfiguring whatever it is, reprogramming the actual parking machines and everything to allow for the higher charge? That's one question, because not all I don't know about park and rides, I don't know whether they take cash, but I know you're moving to a cashless system in the city centre. That was one point. The other one is, and I think it's really similar to Chris's last point, if you decide, 20p extra on £2 is excessive, I won't go to the park and ride, you don't have any very convenient alternatives. It'd be interesting to know about the displacement within city centre or non-city centre car parks when one goes up and the other doesn't, because people do have fairly ready alternatives. So I take Chris's point that this is a little bit of a special case, and you're either using park and ride or you're not. But Jane is going to clarify all of this for us, I can see. She's smiling, so I've got her right.
So it was a very interesting point, the second point that you made there, and Emma's obviously said, at what point do people, I'm only coming in one day a week, heck to it, I'll drive into the city centre and it's less of a faff. I just wanted to explain some of the observations that I've had on behaviours from people I know, which are absolutely parking in the city centre because they think they can, they can afford to if they're only coming in once a week. But also I've seen a lot more people coming in from home on the bus, people that live within easy reach of the city centre, and almost looking at the park and ride as, well, it's a bit of a faff because then I've got to park and then I've got to get a bus. And I'm a bit, it's a bit cheaper maybe if I just come on the bus. So I think we need to remember that the pressure there is, particularly for, a lot of people that come into the city centre are not coming from a million miles away. So there is, I just wanted to us all not forget that extra little bit of pressure.
I think we should just note that we don't have the precise data on which to base it. There are clearly quite a lot of points that would be lovely to know more about. I suppose I would have liked to know, there must be experience elsewhere, but I know every city is unique, Oxford's unique, so maybe you can't generalize from them. But maybe let's now go on to the rest of the paper, because there are other important points here. I will, if I may, let's just go through the first, after just the introduction. Then we have the section on the city centre, which is points 3 to 6. Any questions on that from panel members? I have just one. May I ask my one, which is a fairly obvious point. The Oxpens car park, I know we are anticipating that, and I guess it may be in the context also of Oxwed and so on, that may disappear. However, are we knowing, I was a student at Nuffield, so I would be surprised if there weren't inklings of Nuffield putting in an application for Worcester Street. Do we know anything about that? I mean, because it has to be fairly far advanced. Oxwed is going through the motions now. Do you believe that for Worcester?
So we know that pre-pandemic, they were looking at master planning that area to understand how it might look. It did go on hold during the pandemic, and it's one that we need to discuss with them to understand what their timetable is. So this is us taking a cautious approach around the income, and that it could fall away in the future. So that, even if they're not developing momentarily, they could still no longer want us to be on the site if they need to do surveys and things. So we're trying to be cautious around it, but work with Nuffield College so that we can understand their programme better.
I would suggest that we defer that date, but therefore there is some boost in income. But Amir, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I'm mindful that we've had some colleagues, particularly who joined the joint meeting that we had with the housing panel members, who asked Nigel specifically to try and avoid complicated tables and too much detail. And the reason I raised that point is I was just minded that given that there has been a price increase in the city centre in the time period that we're looking at, it was interesting to me that there was only a 15% fall, roughly looking at the figures, in income, whereas there's a closer to a 20% fall in income, a bit more across the patch. So just to say, it would be interesting to see the numbers, and I'm mindful that not only from member perspective, but also from officer perspective, we want to make sure the reports are not cumbersome to pull together, but it would just be interesting to see actually what's happened to the numbers rather than the income, what's happened to the actual numbers of parking units of parking. I don't know what unit you would use, but just that would be helpful to just make some comparisons if it's possible in future.
I would suggest as an appendix so that it doesn't add to the main report. The other thing is, this presumably isn't that confidential. Is that fair? I mean, would we need to keep that confidential? No.
I think if we were looking at numbers of users and things, I don't think we would need to keep it as confidential, but when we pull the information together, we'll review it just to make sure.
Okay, thanks. It's worth checking. Thank you. May we move on then? There are two paragraphs. One's very short. about EV parking, about Westgate. I mean, we all know the issue with Westgate. Do we have anything to add to what's in the text? Chris?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I would love to hear what the outcomes of those annual meetings with the Westgate have been on parking charges, and whether there's any any positive outcomes that could be described.
So we're due to have the next annual meetings. We try and have them in the first quarter of each calendar year. But previously, we do always discuss the charges. I know that Jason talks to the Westgate regularly anyway in between those meetings and talks about charges and usage. They haven't opted to put their tariffs up so far, although we do continue to have that conversation with them, but it's entirely in their control. We have very little input into what they can do other than having the conversation with them.
Chris, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, just quickly, I guess, so that the paper says that there's an obligation on the Westgate to have regard to the charges in place. Like, what is that obligation of having regard? What does that have any teeth? Does it have any meaning?
It doesn't really. So it means that they need to kind of review the charges that we have on our car parks, on the ones that are specifically listed for them to have regard to, but there is no obligation for them to be aligned with those car parks. So as long as they can say that they have considered it, they don't have to set their tariffs at the same level, and we can encourage them to, but we don't have any teeth behind us to force them to do so.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've covered fairly well already the park and ride. I'm assuming we can go beyond that, if that's acceptable. And then there's the urban and suburban section beginning at paragraph 17, and it goes down to 21. Any questions on that from my fellow members? If not, I have one, but go on, Chris.
Yeah, sorry for all the questions. This is just a quick one really on paragraph 20 and the specific suggestion that the decision not to, or the recommendation not to increase tariffs is as a result of trying to reduce pressure on adjacent streets. And I just wondered how this interplays with the kind of general trajectory that we've seen from the county towards making most of the city into controlled parking zones, because presumably that will be alleviated if areas surrounding the car parks are controlled parking zones. I don't know the details of the 3 CPZs that were approved this morning and whether they have any adjacent car parks, but presumably if that's the risk that you're trying to alleviate, then if CPZs are introduced, that gives you more leeway to then look at charges in these car parks.
Yeah, so I mean that would be something that we take into account when we're reviewing the charges of these car parks. It's the ability for people to kind of spill out onto the joining streets. We try to make it as easy as possible for customers by having kind of a standard tariff over each type of car park. So we have opted not to put them all up this year. I don't know the details of the CPZs that were approved today, but that it's definitely something that Jason's team look at when they're making these recommendations around the kind of outer city car parks. What would the impact be on the surrounding streets if we were to uplift the tariffs? And they take into account any parking enforcement in the surrounding area. I don't know if you wanted to comment any more on that process, Jason, at all.
I think you pretty much covered that, Emma. I think we would work with county as well on increases, and just to understand what their demands are on the network.
Thank you. Amir, your hand is up again.
Yeah, just on bullet point 9, I think it's 19 now, about France Park car park, the new charges. I made the point at some length in one of the budget review group meetings, so I won't labour it here, but just to note my concerns that I raised previously around charging for NHS users specifically at this site. So I just wanted to, I don't know that I need a response specifically because officers were kind to respond last time around, but I just wanted to raise it in the panel meeting formally. And then just to comment, my camera's going to go off because I'm going to try and wolf some dinner down before I have to leave for work. So I'm still here, but my camera will be off to save you all.
You are allowed to eat. I was just going on paragraph 17. I was trying to understand the logic. In 2023, the urban and suburban, i.e. not the park and rides, the forecast is 1.7. And in 23-24, it's 1.5 million. And other than, I think, the point about displacement into neighbouring streets, with CPZs, that shouldn't be happening. We are, I don't know if that's included, we're including proposing charging at Florence Park and out near the Wolvercote car park there. Why the fall? Is there a simple reason?
I think, shall I go, Emma? I think some of this, James, will be down to change in behaviours that, again, that the pandemic has actually brought about. So,
but
people
22-23 is forecast to be 200,000 higher than 23-24. So the pandemic's hit both, and you're having more car parks.
So 2.2 down to 1.7, then revised down to 1.5.
Yes, so 22-23 1.7 and 23. Those are the only two I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I didn't understand why they would fall. It seemed to me with new car parks.
Well, the car parks
no change or a rise.
Yeah, the car parks that are actually being brought online are not going to generate a huge amount of income.
Yeah, but they'll generate some.
They will generate some. I think the other point is that people are using their vehicles less, which.
But they were in 22-23.
They were in 22-23.
And they had higher petrol than they will have probably 23-24. I mean, I'm just saying, I didn't understand the logic and it didn't seem to follow any of the earlier arguments, that's all. I would have thought you could at least have forecast, which is always grist to the mill, we could have had maybe at least a couple of £100,000 more realistically expected for 23-24, i.e. no change, which is not assuming anything from the new car parks. Emma's going to disagree with me. Put me right. Go on, Emma.
No, I'm not at all. I was just gonna ask if Jason and I could maybe take that one away and come back to the group.
Yes,
just
please do.
Just review it again and come back to the group.
It'd be lovely for Nigel and Anna to have a bit of upside down there to put away behind the sofa.
Yeah, yeah, we'll take that one away and report separately on it.
Okay, thanks. So with that, I think we're meant to note this report, isn't that right? We normally note reports, we don't do much more, but yes, you attended and all the rest, I think. So thank you very much, both of you, for coming. You're welcome to stay because this is a bundle of laughs, but if not, you can follow Amir and have some food maybe.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks ever so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So before going to the budget, which will take there's dates of future meetings. We've already mentioned that. There's scrutiny performance monitoring. I don't know if Amir and Chris had a chance to look at the...
You've muted yourself.
Go on mute there, James.
Touch it. I don't know if you managed to look at our revised, and I was saying improved monitoring, but do you have any particular questions on specific points? I can't see Amir, I'll let him eat, but if he wants to, none from him, great, thanks for letting me know. Chris?
Yeah, just the one really, which is on, I'm squinting to read the number, BI001A. And
Local
obviously
yes.
Yeah, so we've obviously now separated out this indicator between the ODS OCHL spending and the council spending. And I think if I recall correctly, the rationale for that was because sometimes the ODS and OCHL data would massively skew things because of large contracts. And yet the council spend line is considerably below the target, which I guess my understanding of the rationale for splitting this out was so that we could see this, and it was often actually the council was generally meeting that target. So I wondered if there's an explanation as to why we're, quite substantially behind that target.
Would you know, Nigel?
Off the top of my head, no. I mean, I don't know what's put out there actually. So the average to date is 37%, and then the figure for December was 32%. No, I'll probably need to take that away, Chris, and just have.
Could I make a suggestion, because this will always come up about large contractors? I mean, I don't care too much about the detail, but it would seem to me useful on the basis of some information to come up with a suggestion for how much of their work they could just ask them, please give us a clue as to when you're doing work for the city. Just would you like, please, to estimate how much is actually done truly locally and how much is, if you like, brought in from outside? Would that be possible? I mean, not now, but it would make it slightly more meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to get the individual. Generally, the larger contractors, etc., are going to be projects in their own right. So we'd have to get the project manager basically to ask that question. But there's no reason why they can't.
I mean, it's as simple. We just we don't want.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd love precision, but we're not going to get it. But we'd like, let's say, within 5 percentile ranges or something. And that would be helpful, because then we could include them. I assume they're excluded at the moment.
Yes, they will be, yes. And I'll check on why that figure's deviating from, well, the average to date is 37 against a target of 45.
Yeah.
But it's still below that target of 45, which we
Any other one, Chris? No. I was going to have just one or two very specific. First one's a bit picky. On CS003 on the first page, the December actual was 88.3, and then the text said we achieved a 90% rate. I would have thought they should be the same number. I don't care what the number is so much, but I like them to be consistent. And it seems odd to give a number and then immediately disagree with it. That's an editing point. Anna, you're the one I'm going to ask about BV008, percentage of invoices paid on time. I don't know how, I thought a Christmas clear out might help to get things paid, but it sounds as if it's made it worse. What did you mean with your clear out?
I think the 88.43 actually is an improvement on previous months. We're obviously not hitting the target, hence it's an amber rated. But it did improve in December, so that's what the comment refers to. Okay, all right, thanks. So maybe next time you could, if necessary, just say this is actually better than it was, even if it's not great. Okay, then total income collection as a percent of plan. Then it just says profile. I mean, I'm not sure I really want to know the detail, but it now says the profile target should be 83.5% when the original target was 96.5. I'm not quite sure what this means, profile. Does it mean that basically 96.5 was much too optimistic, or I don't really understand and it comes up actually in the next one about business rates. What's the significance of a profile target that's clearly significantly below the original target?
Yeah, I think that the point being made there is the profile target up to the end of December. So we should have collected. So the figures in the December column are for December, the month of December. Yes. But the profile target basically for up to that point in the case of income collection should have been 83.5%.
So you're allowing for the timing of people paying, basically. Yes. Okay. Yes. Now I understand what you mean. No, that makes sense. Okay, thanks. I just didn't understand. I've got one for both of you. You both take responsibility. It is rather sad. We've never in these seen any discretionary funding won by the council. Surely we've won some bids somewhere, no? Which of you takes, Anna's going to take responsibility, I think.
I'll take responsibility for this one. Not so far confirmed to date this year. We did have some in previous financial years, but there's nothing been confirmed to me yet. I think there's some in train, so hopefully next month we might have something that we can put in.
I suppose I was disappointed because so much is now up for bid from central government. It would be nice to know. I mean, maybe we share with the county or something, but it'd be nice to know that.
I would just say as well, James, we
Yes.
get a number of grant awards basically, but
That's what
we
I
don't
thought.
necessarily bid for them, sort of thing. And we also have a number of bids in train. So, for instance, the social decarb bid, say on HRA properties,
Yes.
is in the mix at the moment. Whether we get it or not is a different thing. But
Would they be
if we
counted?
did, I would suggest that's counted. I would suggest. I mean, this is a bit of a local indicator, but I would suggest what we're trying to basically show is that how successful we are in bidding for stuff. Actually,
Yes, yeah, that's what I want to know. Yes,
yeah. As opposed to the government giving us a business grant or a homelessness grant or whatever. Basically, what did we bid for and when?
That's the spirit of what I hoped you would do.
Yeah,
the last one, which I'm always skeptical about, I hear that we have 76% actual physically active adults. I'd love to know where the number comes from. And I see it's only annual. So that means Ian doesn't have to do it very often. But I just said I wrote from where? I mean, I just don't know. I don't know, maybe someone out there is going around knocking on lots of doors and just saying, are you active or not? I don't know. It seems slightly odd.
I think it's a question for Ian.
Leisure centres or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
question for Ian, I think, Richard.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
So anyhow, but I think I've raised that before. So is there nothing else? I mean, this is a more useful set, I must say, than some previously, and it's more meaningful. So I will thank you very much.
Yeah.
And maybe we can now go on to the final budget.
Just before I turn that off, sorry.
Yeah, we must go confidential, yes.
The last one, BIC 022, Helen Bishop's one, she has suggested that relates to work she is doing to consider creating a new KPI, and suggests that having nothing to report KPI-wise on it there's not much point it being on your list. And so are you happy to take it off?
I am happy. And Amir's well fed, he's happy. So we're all happy. Okay.